Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I'm gonna give it like a few more minutes for other people to join in, and then we can get started. If you have any questions for me while we're waiting, you can either just type it in the chat or just say it, whatever you prefer. Yeah, we only have like 15 people in here, I think. So I should give a little bit for other people to join. Are you guys finding the lectures useful? It's okay if you're not. Like if they suck, you can just tell me, and I'll do my best to do better on them. But they're meant to complement the readings and not just lecture about all the material over and over and over again. That's kind of the whole point of reading the text. So if there's anything that you would find more useful than what I'm currently doing, just let me know. Is there something that you like about the lectures? Okay.
I think. Oh no, I was gonna talk. I think they're pretty simple and transparent, straightforward. It kind of tells you like what is like what in a very like normalized way and like simple.
Yeah,
Okay.
it like summarizes it. It's very helpful.
Okay, great. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, Canvas is pretty tricky, honestly. I've never used this platform before, but it's actually a lot better than Trax. I don't know if you guys have used Trax before Canvas or whatever, but it's a much better platform, I think. All right, it is 6:30. So the way this is going to work is, as we've discussed before, you come prepared with any questions that you have and use me as a resource. With that being said, right before we start, I uploaded everything for the rest of the semester. I don't know if you guys got that announcement yet, but I only have 25% space remaining on Canvas. And so this meeting that we're doing right now, I'm going to upload to my YouTube channel, which also has some lectures on it. And I'll send out a link in both in the announcements and an email to the class so everyone has access to it rather than deleting stuff that I've already uploaded. It just makes it easier, I think, if you're all good with that. Okay, so there's no particular order. Anybody can just chime in either through text or their microphone, and let's get started.
On chapter 1, what are the mental/abstract aspects of regions? Because I
Okay.
got the economic and political and all that, but I couldn't find the mental or abstract.
Okay, so let me go. I have all of these open, so I'm about to share my screen. So let me know. Are you guys seeing now the chapter 1 slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So you're asking about mental and abstract regions.
Yes.
Okay, I see that. I see. So there's no specific example in the yellow slide. So what I mean by an abstract region is when I say to you the New York metropolitan area, what comes to your mind?
The New York Square.
Okay, like there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's just whatever
Yeah.
your personal. The whole point about regions being mental or abstract is the social construction that we have of them,
Oh, okay.
right? So
I know what you mean.
right? So it's how somebody perceives a region, right? Like if I asked you, I don't know, what's the most economically prosperous city in Texas, for example, what would you say?
Austin?
Right. I don't know, right? But you have your reasons for saying Austin, right? Maybe it's the capital city, right? Maybe there's, a bunch of high income housing, whatever it is, right? As long as you can justify the abstract reasoning for the region, then that's really what an abstract region is, right? Does that help? Okay.
So it's safe to say that that's going to be more towards open-ended question, correct?
Yeah. Oh, and if I guess I'm not sure if you guys read all my announcements, but the test is 25 pretty much open-ended questions. So the reason you might hate me for that, but the reason that I do that is because multiple choice is just testing your memory, and I'm more interested in assessing your thinking skills. They're not like 5-paragraph essay formats, but they're open-ended. So it's if you can justify your reasoning, by all means, go ahead. But with that said, there's also 5 extra credit questions. So you know there's there's room to earn bonus points on it.
How long are you looking for the answers to be for each of the questions?
I don't care how long they are, as long as they answer the question fully, as long as you feel like you've answered the question fully. So for example, like some of our reflection assignments, they have 750 word requirements. There's no kind of requirements on this exam, and there's also a 3-hour time limit. So let me be very clear, because I don't want people to make mistakes here. You can open the test in the browser, but if you close it while the test is open, that's it. Whatever you have is automatically submitted. So make sure that you're in a good spot to take the test. Make sure you have good internet, and you only have one attempt. With that being said, you can go back and forth in between the questions and edit them up until the time that you edit the test. So you have 3 hours to take the test. It's only 25 questions. I think that's more than adequate. I don't think it'll take anybody 3 hours to do it, but if you need the time, it's there. Good questions. Okay, anybody else? So the review's only going to last as long as you want it to, because I'm not going to go through each of these topics. So if you don't have questions, then I assume that you're good on the material.
Okay, I'll ask another one.
All right.
Okay, shoot, I forgot what the question was. Okay,
Let me stop share. Okay.
spatial association.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? Because I am confused on
So what is a spatial association?
It
Your current understanding of a spatial association, what is it?
Well, I wrote down the definition. It says occurs within a region of the distribution of one feature is related to the distribution of another feature.
Right.
So is that just something relative to something else? Is that what you mean?
Relative, but they're related in some way.
I mean, they're close to each other.
Not necessarily proximity wise. Right? Like they could be socially related. They could be economically related, right? They could be politically related. So you see the maps. I forget which spatial association should also be chapter
It's
1 or 2. Okay, let me open up. You're saying it's 2? I think it's 1.
No, it's 1.
Okay, one sec. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Yeah. So here we have a spatial association between areas. Can you all see this slide, spatial association at various scales? Okay, so here is an association between like partisanship and who people voted for versus the area in which they live. So the spatial association is partisanship, which is which political party you belong to or voted for, versus the area in this case. But for example, if we wanted to talk about if we looked at this map and took away partisanship and just kept like income, for example, we could say that the blue states are the blue counties, are high income on the right here, and the red are low income. So they're spatially associated with the area that they're in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if I asked you on the exam to provide an example of a spatial association, would you be able to do that?
So, okay. It's just.
So remember, it's a distribution of a feature, right? It's okay. It's a distribution of one feature that's related to another.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do understand. Okay.
So that's no problem. That's it's the definition on the previous slide. So occurs within, right? It occurs within a region and in a specific area, but it's when something is related to something else, right? And when something affects the distribution of something else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Good question. I'm going to stop sharing in between questions so I can open up other slides if I need to do that. Okay. What else?
I had one about the immigration nation assignment.
Not going to be on the test, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. It was just the one about the number of contradictions surrounding positions with the education. I got that one wrong, but I didn't really understand. Like, I thought it was just because people were upset because they were basically paying the schools to teach illegal immigrants.
So I think that's number 8, and
Yes.
specifically what I was looking for there is how scholarships are awarded to undocumented immigrants. That's the one contradiction. And then
Oh, okay.
the other contradiction had to do with housing being built by illegal immigrants. I think the guy was Hershek. That Mr.
Yes.
Hershek like directly employed. He was mad that illegal immigrants kept coming to the U.S., but he kept employing them to build houses.
Yes.
Right.
He said
Okay.
he had to make his way of living because he has a family, which I thought was super ironic.
Yeah.
And I think
It kind of all of it was.
I liked how the video at least gave you both sides of that story, because a lot of the time, especially today, we only see usually like the one kind.
Side.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. You guys are making me nervous. Are you guys are you okay with this material, or I'm assuming you are.
I have a question on the diffusion of religion.
Yeah.
So like Islam, and then like Christianity, and then
Mhm.
I'm looking at my notes right now for it, and Buddhism.
Yeah.
Did you want to go into depth with about it, like how like hierarchical, like we had a kingdom, like who was it, the emperor, like the Roman emperor? He like.
I mean, I don't want like historical specifics, but if you're able to explain how religion has spread using those methods of diffusion, like hierarchical,
Like a king just like spreading his popularity of reign or something like that, or
yeah, kind of. But like when we talk about hierarchy, right, that is related to power. But when hierarchical power can also be through force.
yeah. So we're like with the conquistadors, like with the Spaniards, and then with like the Mayans and stuff. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. I was just wondering.
Yeah. So on the exam, like if I asked you to pick any religion of your choice and then explain how, if I asked you to pick a religion and pick a type of diffusion and explain how that type of diffusion influenced the spread of that religion,
Yeah.
you should be able to do that now, right?
Okay. Yeah. That's what I was just wondering. I was curious to like how like simple you wanted it or not.
Just enough to get the the point across, but not brief enough that I don't know what you're trying to say.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Anybody else?
Can we get a brief rundown on like the stages? Like, was it from like chapter 1 or 2?
What do you want? I'm sorry. Your mic is like really loud.
My bad.
That's okay.
From like a brief rundown of like each stage, like an example.
A stage of what? Sorry.
Like stage 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Are you referring to the demographic transition model?
Let's see here. About it. I believe it is the demographic transition model.
Okay. So somebody else in here tell me what stage 1 is. And so first of all, before we start talking about the stages, right? You should know now what like crude birth rate is, right? Crude death rate is, and the rate of natural increase. So crude birth rate, right, is the number of births per 1,000 people in the population. The same thing for deaths, right? And then we take the crude birth minus the crude death, and that's how we determine the rate of the natural increase. So for stage 1, which no countries are in stage 1, right? Which is good. Stage 1 is indicative of both high crude death and high crude birth rate. And so when a lot of people are being born, but a lot of people are dying, the rate of natural increase is non-existent, right? It's not really increasing because nobody's really living long. So with that being said, stage 2 now is still a high birth rate, but then the death rate starts to decline. So people are living longer. So the rate of natural increase is actually heavily going up. And then when you get into stage 3, there's less people being born, but still more people are being born than dying in stage 3. So the rate of natural increase is moderately increasing. It's not as drastic as the increase in stage 2. And then when you get to stage 4, like some countries in Europe, you have low birth, which is there's really nobody being born. A lot of these populations are older, right? Like we look at like Japan and Germany, for example, as some of those. But the death rate is also low. So the rate of natural increase is almost, it can be 0 or negative in that case, because not only is the elderly population, not having children, but they're mostly in developed countries, and because of medicine, they're able to live longer. So with that being said, if I was to ask you to explain those 3 characteristics, CBR, CDR, and the rate of natural increase for each stage, would you be able to do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then I don't want to give all of it away, but there is an extra credit that involves the diseases associated with each of those stages. So,
Right.
Are you gonna ask us what countries are in which stage, or do we? Should we
I may
say
ask
that?
you. I may ask you to pick a country and determine which stage it's in, and support your answer. Or I may give you a population pyramid to read.
Okay.
So, are we good on population pyramids, everybody?
I know what it is,
Yeah.
but I don't
let me go through
really
it.
know how to read it.
I think that was.
Where it has like China and it has like more older people than young people. And then the one, is that the one, the right one, right? Or one of them?
I'm trying to find it so that I can share my screen.
I think it's chapter 2.
Thank you. Okay. Chapter 2. Okay. Chapter 2. Yeah, so Austin, what you were just asking about, this is just me trying to visualize what I just said previously, right? We talk about this red line as the rate of natural increase. And then you have the birth and death rate up here. And then here are like examples on the bottom. I'm pointing to my own screen, which is not helping you. Here are some examples of just some certain countries that are in these stages. But if I give you a population pyramid, like let's look at Israel, for example. Can you guys all see this? This is not Israel. This is Israel. But I think Niger was. I think it's clear, this one, right? Yeah. All right. Let's look at this one then. So the length of the bar is the amount of the population in that age. So each of the bars are in 5-year age gaps, right? So here, most people, what does this say, right? Actually most of the people in this country are 0 to 5 years old, right? And we know that because of the length of the bar. So if I was to ask you, which stage do you think Niger is in, and does Niger have a high? Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Okay. Does Niger have a high or low dependency ratio? How do you determine that? And what is a dependency ratio?
It would have a high dependency ratio because most of the children or most of the population is below working age.
Okay, yes, but also what about the older population?
There's much of the older population. So like the dependents, aren't they like, I think 65 and up or something? Like that's
Well,
what
in the U.S., right, that would technically be considered that, right? Well, all right, let's look at Israel then. And I know this is not as clear. Maybe I can, no, shrinking it down doesn't even help. But the same kind of thing here, right? Zero to 100, right? You have 0 to 100. What would you say about Israel? High or low dependency ratio?
A high dependency because it looks like there's a lot of old people. Wait, no, I got you.
So here's the
Oh wait,
thing.
no, there's a lot of young people.
Here's the thing that I don't want you to get confused about, right? Don't just assume that the length of the bar is going to tell you everything, because again, these are 5-year intervals, right? So if I asked you working age, that starts at 15. So 15 to all the way to 65, right, for Israel, from here to here, right? The length of the bar dictates how many people, in this case, population in thousands. So does Israel have a high dependency ratio? I would say no. And that's because people's 15 to 19, 20 to 24, right? Look how long those bars are, and look how the length of those bars almost stays the same as we go up through the age groups, right? So if I asked you what the working population is, working age population, we could say 15 to 65, and that would be the majority of people in Israel, right? 15 to 65. So although, ages 5 to 9, there are a lot of young people in Israel, when we add up the rest of the working population numerically, it far outnumbers the dependents. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if anyone's confused about that, I'll be happy to explain that, like, in more detail, I guess.
So the dependency is has to do with working.
Right. So people that are dependent on other people to survive, like in the United States, we have Social Security, right? So Social Security, when you're working, you pay into that your entire life, right? It comes out of your check. And then when you're older, you receive, X amount of money, from that program that other working class people have paid into. So dependency is people that either don't work or are unable to work. And that's usually children, 15 and under, or people at least in the United States, 65 and older.
So you want to look at 15 to 65-year-olds whenever you're talking about.
Right, but when if I'm asking you about the dependency ratio, so for example, if we can see here, 30 to 34, it looks like somewhere in between. It looks like it's almost, I don't know, what would say, 300,000? Or close to 300,000, right? But that's only people 30 to 34. Then when we add up 25 to 29, 20 to 24, 15 to 19, right, we can see now that the working age population is stacking up and that it far outnumbers the dependents.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Are we good on that? Can I move on? Can I ask another question? I'll just ask questions at this point, because I think it's easier to do it this way.
I'd just like to clarify that Niger was a high dependency ratio.
Niger, let me go back. Am I still, what do you guys see on my screen right now?
Israel.
Okay, because I didn't stop sharing it. Do you see Niger now? Okay.
Yes.
Right. So with Niger, that is a high dependency ratio. Why?
Because most people are not between the ages of 15 and 65.
Add up each bar from 15 and under compared to 20 to 65, and it still outnumbers, right?
So my question would be, at what age do you consider the working age? Because they do have sweatshops and they have child labor. So what is a safe amount?
We're going with the UN and assuming that there's no forced or child labor here, and so we're going to say 15. So 15,
okay, gotcha.
15 to at least 70 or 65, your choice. I mean, the dependency ratio is not going to be determined by one age group. Well, the difference between one age group. between a working class population. Does that make sense? Like if you said, oh, I think 55 is the cutoff, and I say 50, well, they're basically almost the same, right? So that's really not going to make a difference in your determination of if there's a high or low dependency ratio.
I have
Okay,
a question whenever people are.
Yeah, what's your name, man? I can't. You don't have a name on your.
Oh, my name is Eli. I think.
Oh, hey Eli, go ahead.
Hello. So my question is more related to the exam. When we're taking the exam, you said that we're not allowed to close in and out of the window for the. I'm curious.
No. Sorry, not the browser. Don't exit out of the browser. I'm sure you can have the tabs open if you want.
Okay, and that's what I was curious. Like I have notes on your PowerPoint slides, but if there's something that I'm going through and I see a question where I don't have that answer in my notes, will I be able to go on and look at these slides online, or will it mess up the test in any way?
I don't think it should, as long as you're not, opening the slides on the same tab, right, that you have the test open on.
Awesome, perfect. That was my question.
Yeah, so a safe way I do it is I just take the tab and I move it out of its box pretty much. So pretty much it's like it's in its own web browser.
Yeah.
And then I open up files to the rest. So they're two separate things. So you have a less likely chance of closing it out by accident.
Cool.
Good question.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you explain institutional languages and like go into depth about it?
Okay. So what is an institutionalized language? I'm not expecting Justin to answer that, right? Because he asked the question, but somebody else. So what's an institutionalized language?
Used in education, work, mass media, and government.
Yeah. Right. So in the United States, what language are your driver's licenses in?
English.
Right. What are the languages that the road signs are in?
English.
Your birth certificates?
English.
work contracts, my class, right? English. And so institutionalized means that public records and official documents have to be translated into those languages. So in the United States, it's a little different, right? Because we don't have an official language. We have a de facto language, which is like a go-to language, which is English. But institutionalized means that the government recognizes that language as its official language. Now you can have more than one official language, right? As in the case of Switzerland. And I gave you some of those examples on the PowerPoint, and also like Quebec, right, in Canada.
Like French and English.
Right. And French has been institutionalized there, right? Because the majority of residents in Quebec speak French. Right, but don't get confused with just because the majority of people in an area speak a certain language, that doesn't mean it's institutionalized. Right, like South Texas doesn't have an institutionalized language, although, right, the de facto language in South Texas would certainly be Spanish.
So one more question about that. So with Quebec, they speak French, and Canada, most of them speak English. Would that be like the same branch, English and French, same language branch, I should say?
So the family would be Indo-European, right? Which is, remember, if the family is the trunk of the tree, and then we have the specific branches that go out. And so like French and English, they would be like the leaves. But they would share a common branch, which is escaping me right now. Let's go. Am I sharing a screen yet, or do you guys just see me?
It's just you.
Okay. Let me share chapter. Where's chapter 5? Okay.
Of the potatoes? Oh, nice.
Do you guys see chapter 5 now?
Yes, we
All
have
right.
slides.
So to try to answer your question here, we have, this is Sino-Tibetan. Okay, Indo-European, right? And then you're curious about, by the way, I'm not going to ask you like the specific groups of languages, but just to help try to answer your question now. I'm trying to look for English on one of these leaves. There's Greek. But anyway, it would stem from one of these, if that helps. Like these branches up here, like West Germanic, Romance, Indo-Aryan, East Slavic. You don't need to know that for the test. What I would be concerned about from chapter 5 from the test would be, first of all, knowing what a language is. Definitely know what an institutionalized language is and how we group languages or how we organize them, which is pretty much the slide that you're looking at right now. Okay,
Right.
good questions. What else?
What how do you pronounce Hertz?
Hertz,
Hertz.
yeah.
What I mean, on the review, you said how diffusion affects folk and pop culture, and in parentheses, you said barriers, Hertz, etc.
Right.
What are those?
So, did you reviewed the chapter 4 on folk and pop culture?
Yes.
So remember
yeah.
the part that's talking about like the Himalayas, and
Yes.
so on one of them, let me try to pull it up. I'll stop sharing this one. Okay. Did anybody check out my Sweet Russia video? It hurts. It hurts you guys. Okay. Maybe I'm skipping it here. Okay, yeah. So when we're talking about diffusion, and we talked about inter-regional versus intra-regional, right? When we're talking about folk culture, those are usually small and isolated cultures, right? And the reason that they're small and isolated is usually due to physical barriers. Like, so for example, like the Himalaya mountains. So you have on this right figure here, selected ethnic groups, and each different color represents an ethnic group. And so the reason why that these ethnic groups still exist and they still maintain their own culture is because of limited mobility, right? The mountains themselves act as barriers to slow the spread or make it non-existent of other types of cultures and languages. So that's when I said barriers, etc. That's what I mean. But
Okay.
but how, like, that's an example of how a physical barrier would affect folk culture. But what about popular culture? Do physical barriers really affect popular culture?
No.
Right, they don't. So
No.
what are some barriers that do affect pop culture? And remember, we're always using the spatial components in this class, no matter what.
Media.
Go ahead, somebody. What'd you say, Eli?
It's media.
Yeah, right. The media plays a huge role, right? The internet, not only the internet, but control and governance of the internet, right? So just the jumping off point there, if I asked you, what type of content do authoritarian governments typically censor, right? What would you say?
Social media, like you were saying, China uses WeChat. Is it WeChat? I believe they're not allowed to go on certain websites. That was Iran, Syria, and China had the most strict.
You're right, but I'm asking you, what specific content gets banned?
Maybe international content.
Bashing their own government.
Political, social content, security content, anything that messes with their government, pretty much.
Right. Yeah. So like direct, like opposition to the current political party in power, right? But also there's some cultural taboos, right? Some things like alcohol or sex. Right. So they may get banned. And so the reason, let me try to find this slide here. Yeah, so this guy actually posted on social media about him drinking like 30 years ago. And the government saw it and they retroactively punished him for it. So It's important though that you know that Iran is not an authoritarian government in the sense that, as far as governance goes, it's a theocracy, which means that it's governed by principles of religion, right? So that's different from countries like Russia, for example. Is that they're not governed by like religious principles like Iran is.
So, what would you say the tactics that governments use to censor this type of stuff is?
Well, they have like employees of the government that it's their job to monitor this stuff, kind of like the United States does with the NSA. Obviously, not to the extent that the NSA does, but there's people that monitor it. There's algorithms that pick it up. So it searches for keywords and images. A lot of the times, these governments use AI technologies to be able to like evaluate pictures that are uploaded. Like for example, you guys have Instagram, right? When you post something on Instagram, you may get a message that says like it doesn't follow their community guidelines. That's not because somebody saw it and flagged it immediately. That's because of the algorithms that Instagram uses to determine that it may not fit their guidelines. So you get a warning message, right? So those are mostly the tactics that governments may employ. I'm not too familiar with government censorship, but I mean, as far as surveilling a mass amount of people, those are the most, I guess, technologically advanced ways to do it. Good question. All right, let me stop sharing, and I'm going to take a look at the review sheet here. Okay, yeah. You need to be familiar with the Immigration and Naturalization Acts. So they may not be too elaborated on in Chapter 3, but I do elaborate on them heavily in my Chapter 3 lecture. So let's talk about like the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act. Oh, sorry, we have some chats here. So the test is open notes. Yes, I have no control if you use your notes or not. So of course it's open notes. What part do you need us to know about industrialists needed labor? Are you wanting to know why after 1910 the economy declined? No to both of those. You don't need to know. You don't need to know that. So, but we do need to know, yeah, you're welcome. You do need to know what the 1965 Act is. So what is that?
It abolished the quoted system and instilled a preference from skilled labor, asylum seekers, and family reunification.
Good. So without looking at my lecture, when you read those texts at face value, they're probably really not helpful to you. So the Immigration and Naturalization Acts are what the government implements as far as how many people are allowed to come to the United States per year and who is allowed to come to the United States. So in 1952, they instilled this preference for skilled labor in 1952 because post-World War, the economy was booming, and so they needed outside labor and specifically cheap labor to keep up with that demand. So in 1965, right, and up until 1965, the United States is relatively homogeneous, and the fact that it's mostly white at this point, majority speaking. But post 1965 and the 1965 Act did three important things, right? And I want you to know these three important things. So number one, it abolished the quota system. So previously, before 1965, they had caps on the limits of immigrants that could come from each specific country. So for example, Taiwan, 5,000, Japan, 5,000, right? 1965 eliminates that and just has one big quota for everyone. So regardless of the country, now, as long as it's under, for example, hypothetically, 1 million, it doesn't matter how many people immigrate from specific countries anymore. That's the first thing it did. The second thing that it did was it kept that preference for skilled labor, but it also put emphasis on family reunification. So now, family reunification, the immigrants that come to the United States, they're able to bring their immediate family members. And that makes sense, right? But what's more important here is that say that this new quota now, right? When I'm talking about abolish the quota system, I'm saying from individual countries. There's still a limit on the total number, right? But now the interesting part about this law is, say for example, someone comes from Spain, an immigrant from Spain comes to the United States, and they bring their immediate family members. Those immediate family members are not counted in those numerical limits. So for example, you can have 1 million immigrants come to the United States and fill that 1 million quota, but in reality, you may have 5 million people that immigrated to the United States, and those are not counted in those limits. So those are the three big things that law did. Now, why is that important, and why do I want you to know that? Because if I asked you, put yourself in a situation where you might be a congressman, and it's your job to propose this law, the 1965 law, to the president at the time, and you have to write a report on the potential impacts that this law may have on the United States, right? You're going to use those spatial thinking components to explain the impacts, the different impacts that this law may have in the United States, right? Socially, the ethnic composition is much more diverse now because there's no more individual limits, right? Economically, could be a powerhouse, could bring a lot more labor into the United States, or, right, it could reduce the amount of native-born people that are employed because immigrants tend to work for cheaper costs in low-skilled positions. And when we talk about politically, right, when you eliminate quotas and you have more people from a specific country moving to the United States, and it establishes these flows of migration, for example, like Chinese students in the United States, right? International Chinese students make up a significant portion of international students overall. And so when you have these migration flows, relationships between countries tend to be better, right? And that would be the political aspect. But environmentally, right, there may be less housing available in cities, right, because of such a population increase. So I don't want to go on, but you get the idea, right? That you use those spatial thinking components to tell a story about the potential impacts of that law. Does that make sense? Cool.
Yes.
What do you mean when you're saying they're not counted?
Right, so they're not counted in that. Okay, when I say they, I mean the immediate family members of. Right. So, say for example the big cap, right? From all the countries for 1 year in the United States is 1 million, right? And say 1 million immigrants migrate and they fill that quota. Now they're eligible to bring over their immediate family members. So say each immigrant brings over two family members, right? If each one brings over 2, then that's 3 million people total, correct? Right, the original migrant and then the 2 family members. So you have 3 million people. But the people that they bring over as immediate family members, they're not counted in that limit.
Of that 1 million limit.
I'm sorry?
Of that 1 million limit, right?
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. Good question. Acculturation and assimilation, what are the differences between them?
I would say people adjusting to the culture and taking in new values versus
Which one?
For acculturation.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So people taking in new values, cultures from the place they're going to versus assimilation where they're forced to take on the new culture. So one's forced, one's they willingly do it.
So one may not necessarily be forced, right? So you may not be forced to assimilate. You may choose to assimilate. So for example, speaking English at home, that's largely a choice, right?
Yes.
right? So that's not something that's forced. A good way to think about assimilation is as far as immigration goes. Immigrants who assimilate tend to abandon their native language in favor of the host country's language, right? So if we just keep using the United States as an example, that would be English. Depending though, where they move to in the United States, right? So for example, if they're coming from a country in Latin America and they're moving to South Texas, that may not happen, right? Because South Texas largely speaks Spanish. So the place is dependent, but it's also individual preference. And so acculturation is when you take things from the host culture that you like while maintaining your own identity and culture.
So that the Latin Americans moving to South Texas, that would be an example of acculturation.
It may be, right, but it's individual choice. I only use South Texas as an example because it's heavily Spanish speaking, and so an immigrant from Latin America that speaks Spanish natively, that comes to South Texas and finds a plethora of other Spanish speakers, they may not choose to learn English or speak English at home, right? Because they don't have to. Their environment and their society that they're around speaks English. But if they move to New Jersey, for example, they would have a much harder time, right? And so, but it's still that individual preference. No, at least in the U.S. context, there's no forced assimilation. But I will say, when I say forced, I mean with actual like physical force. Because if someone goes to school and they're a native Spanish speaker and they come to the United States, they are forced technically to learn English, right? Because although it's not an institutionalized language, that's what all of our public documents and records are in, right?
Yeah.
So there's a gray line there, but what I really want you to know is assimilation is kind of the abandonment of your native culture in favor of the host, and acculturation is just kind of having a foot in each door. Good questions. Okay. We've gone through a lot here. What is a pattern? And if you've watched the lectures, I say this every lecture, what a pattern is. Somebody please tell me what a pattern is so I don't go insane.
It's like when someone repeatedly, like a repetition of a certain thing.
Over time.
Yes, thank you, right? So patterns are distributions over time. So how something's distributed, like we saw the spatial associations, right? If we monitor that over different time periods and the changes we observe, those are patterns. You need to know what a pattern is. How about types of densities? What are some different types of densities? And what do they mean?
Do you mean like,
Oh, go ahead.
do you mean like where most people buy homes and there's a graph on like, this is where the population of people will buy the home instead of renting their home? Or am I off a little bit?
No, you're not wrong. But that falls within one type of specific density.
Okay.
So, ta-da! Types of densities. So you have population density, which is what you were just saying, right? About people moving to an area and occupying space. But then we have something called arithmetic density, right? Which is just the total number of people divided by the actual land mass that they're settled on. There's also other types of densities, right? We have physiological, which again is just the amount of arable land. And arable land is just land that is farmable for agriculture. And then we have agricultural density, which is pretty much like the number of farmers per farms. So again, just be familiar with these types of densities and be able to define them if I ask you to just define two types of densities. I'm not looking for the specific examples of densities, if that helps. Are you good, Eli? All right. Cool.
Are you going to be having questions regarding space and maps and connections, like the definition of those?
For space?
Yes. The concept of space, the physical gaps, and are you going to be asking that?
I think that is chapter 1.
Yes.
Place. I'm not going to ask you about place, but I am going to ask you about a region. But it's so this may be like a test you've never taken before, and I don't know if that's good or bad. But this test is designed to make you think, right? And so it's not just knowing what place is, but taking that knowledge and applying it in a way that to the real world that makes sense. And so if you're nervous, don't be. But my whole goal is so that we think critically about these things, and we don't just take one aspect of something. We don't just take the definition of something and say that's what it is, right? We're always looking at, the power relationships behind who produces knowledge, who says, who gets to say, right? And something that says this is fact, right? You should be questioning everything you're reading, especially now that I don't know how many of you this is their first college course, but if it is, that's great. And just take that same kind of mentality with you through anything that you're reading, right? When you look at I know I'm rambling now, but when you look at like a study done, right? And they say, okay, we find little to no evidence of climate change. And then you look at who funded that study, and it's ExxonMobil. You know what I'm saying? It's not a coincidence, right? That finding funded by ExxonMobil found little to no evidence of climate change. We take that same kind of questioning and use those spatial components to assess any kind of situation that we're looking at, especially in this course. I don't know if that helps. Is anybody unclear still on the spatial components and what I'm trying to get out of you?
No, I understand it. It's just like the political, economic, and like the different aspects, if I'm correct, like how it affects other things besides just like the generalized what it is.
Right. And we still just don't take the social and economic. We don't just take one of those separately, right? They're all related in some way. And it's your job to explain those relationships. That's what I'm trying to get at. Okay. How are we doing? We're going on 50 minutes here. Again, I'm going to upload this to YouTube so I don't have to delete anything off of Canvas. And don't worry, I will give you the link in the announcements, and I'll also send it to email. That being said, I'm just looking at the review sheet quickly here. Oh, the only Immigration and Naturalization Act to target a specific ethnic group.
Chinese Exclusion Act?
Yeah, right? It says it right in the name. Yes. Okay. I think we covered a lot of these. Oh, be familiar with different types of migration. So for example, I mean, there were tons introduced here. You have interregional, intra-regional, emigration, immigration, right? International migration, and also know the differences between refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced persons. So very quickly, what are those differences between refugees, IDPs, and asylum seekers?
Aren't refugees like taken in from other countries, but asylum, it's like they're trying to get away from, like escape from theirs?
I mean, in a way, but that's not. If I asked you to explain that to me, do I really get the sense of what the differences are?
Not really.
All right, I'm going to ask Michaela. What do you think, Michaela? I put her on the spot. She might not even be. Oh, okay, cool. She unmuted.
Yeah,
Let's get.
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, I have like things going on in the background, so I don't really know, like, to be really honest with you.
All right, that's fine. I'm glad that you're honest with me. How about Hans? You there?
Hey, John. Yeah, I'm here. Just I have 1% battery on my phone. I've had it for like 5 minutes, so I don't know when it's gonna drop.
Rip. All right.
So you asked about refugees and asylum seekers.
Yeah. What are the differences?
So I'd say refugees are typically running away from a war. Asylum seekers could be displaced temporarily, and they're just looking for a spot to survive for a bit and then return.
Okay.
Is that?
Maybe, you're close. How about Genesis?
Refugees would be ones who've been taken into countries to escape for certain reasons, political reasons. Asylum seekers are wanting to be recognized as refugees.
Right. So that's perfect, Genesis. So refugees, number one, they cross international borders. That's the first characteristic of a refugee. The second one is that they're categorized as refugees for fleeing their immediate danger and safety. Now, how is that different from an asylum seeker? An asylum seeker tries to be recognized as a refugee. So someone comes to another country in hopes of being recognized as a refugee, meaning they hope that their reasons for coming to the country, illegally, are recognized as fleeing immediate danger and safety. And so those are different from internally displaced persons, because internally displaced persons, they don't leave the country. They stay within the country. So for example, like natural disasters are a big reason for IDPs, right? They're not leaving the country, but they're forced to move from their current settlement because of something, right? Whether that's violence, or whether that's political conflict, whether that's a natural disaster. So those are the differences. Good job, Genesis. All right. Any other questions before we wrap this up?
No.
All right. Well, I hope that this was helpful for you. And starting in a half hour, exam 1 becomes available. So if nobody has anything to do tonight, maybe while this is fresh in your mind, it might be a good idea to jump on that quiz or the exam 1. With that being said, it is available until October 1st, the end of October 1st. And if you don't take the exam, I can't do anything about that. I can't help you. So please take it. And if there's not any other questions, I'm going to end this meeting, and I will post this recording to review.
I'm sorry, did you say quiz or exam?
Yeah, I just misspoke. It's
Okay. I was just.
yeah, no, it's exam. But off that point, you can find the exam either under quizzes. There's no exam tab. So if you go to quizzes on Canvas, it'll be there. But it'll also be at the bottom of assignments. So either one you click is fine. It's available in 2 spots. But thanks for reminding me. Okay.
What percentage of this is our overall grade?
30.
Okay.
Yeah, you have both exams are 30, and then the remaining assignments, including video assignments, make up the rest of the 60%. Or, wow, my math is terrible. 40%. But don't worry, I most likely will give extra credit opportunities if you feel like you need it. All right, I'm looking at you, Eli. I want you to do well.
Oh, I'll do fine.
All right, man. Cool. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, have a great weekend, guys, and good luck on the test.
Thank you, Professor.
No problem. Take it easy. Bye.
Thank you.